On behalf of Team Practical Spirituality, we would like to welcome all of you to today's webinar, Remembering His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj. It's our great fortune to have with us today Maharaj's god brother and senior disciple of Srila Prabhupada, His Grace Srutakirti Prabhuji. On behalf of all the devotees, we welcome you, Prabhuji. Although
Charu.
Prabhuji is extremely well known, still I would like to briefly introduce him for those who are new to the movement. Prabhuji joined ISKCON at a young age and moved into the temple at the age of 19 in April 1971. He became Srila Prabhupada's servant during Janmashtami in 1972 and served Prabhupada very closely for 2.5 years. He would travel with Srila Prabhupada to various countries. He noted the details of his travels, and thus he is one of the greatest speakers on Srila Prabhupada's pastimes. Prabhuji is also the author of the very famous book, What is the Difficulty, which came out in the year 2006, wherein he has very nicely written about his experiences with Srila Prabhupada. Prabhuji is currently living in Vrindavan and he has been widely preaching everywhere in the world, fulfilling Srila Prabhupada's mission. It is an honor to have you with us, Prabhuji. Thank you so much for taking out time of your schedule to be with us and provide solace to the hearts of so many devotees.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Charu Swami Iti Namane. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namane. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pachani Nirvisesa Sandhavari Prasachati Panchakampa Tadvistaki Pasandubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. So thank you very much. Of course, it's very wonderful to be here today. Of course, the circumstances that bring us together have been certainly been very difficult for everyone. Of course, myself had said today to speak about Bhakti Charu Maharaj. It's been over the last few years, just these last 2 years, that I've gotten to know him more and more. Circumstances made it that this last Janmashtami festival and the last two Panihati festivals, which took place in Atlanta in the USA, both Bhakti Charu Maharaj and myself were the guest speakers. So particularly in the last few years, we were getting closer and closer. Maharaj, I have to say, it was such a pleasure to be with him. One thing I've heard here in Vrindavan, we've had a few classes on the day he left, and then 3 days, just I guess 2 days ago, we had class. And many of my god brothers and god sisters were speaking about Maharaj. And of course, as I'm sure many of you have heard and many of you have realized on your own, thing that set Maharaj so much apart from many of us was Prabhupada was such a, Bhakti Charu Maharaj was very much a Prabhupada man from the very beginning. I'm sure you all know much of his history, how he came to ISKCON the end of 1976. And of course, at that time, I was already in Hawaii. I was temple president at the Hawaii temple. And it was in 1977, August, the month of August, 1977. And that was right before Prabhupada went to England. I was there for 2 weeks. And of course, I stayed right at Prabhupada's quarters there. I was helping my godbrother Upendra as Prabhupada's servant. And of course, that's the first time I got to meet Bhakti Charu Maharaj. He was already Maharaj, as Prabhupada gave him initiation very quickly, first, second, and sannyas initiation when he was young. And just the 2 weeks I was there, Maharaj, of course, made a great impression on me. And from the very beginning, we had that in common. I guess he started out being Prabhupada practically Prabhupada's personal servant from the very beginning. Myself, as I said, I joined in 1971, and 1 year later, living in the temple, I became Prabhupada's personal servant. And being with him, we were like brothers. We were like brothers, as we had the same father that we were personally serving. So we got along very well from the very beginning. I didn't see him for a time. Like I said, I was there for 2 weeks. I left right after Prabhupada left and went to England. Bhakti Charu Maharaj, of course, couldn't go. He didn't have his passport and visa in order to take the trip. This was the beginning of September 1977. And at that time, Tamal Krishna Maharaj went with him. Abhirama Prabhu went with him. And Guru Kripa Prabhu also went. So they were there. But Bhakti Charu Maharaj, who Prabhupada wanted to go with him at that time because he was in Vrindavan, he was taking care of all of Prabhupada's personal items. He was taking Prabhupada's medicine. Prabhupada had him. He was the only one to administer medicine to Srila Prabhupada while he was there. But he couldn't go. And Prabhupada left very early in the morning to go to England, like 2 o'clock in the morning, they left for the airport. And later on in the day, one of my godbrothers who was also living here, he saw Bhakti Charu Maharaj. He was sitting in his room and just sitting in the corner. How you say, he was like kneeling in the corner, and he was just crying and crying. And devotee asked him, what happened? So he said, I couldn't go. I couldn't go on the trip. I couldn't get my visa. My passport wasn't in order, so I couldn't go. And of course, he felt lost. Prabhupada had left. Of course, he came back 2 weeks later. I got to meet Maharaj in the 90s. He actually was very important in my life later on, although I just knew him a little bit, 70s and 80s. By 1985, I was living back in the Philadelphia area near the Philadelphia Temple. And at that time, in the mid-1990s, 1995, Bhakti Charu Maharaj made an arrangement. He was on the GBC. Of course, they had a committee they had established, and it was him that had done it. But he wanted to bring back his god brothers and god sisters that were outside of ISKCON, that it seemed had gone away for a variety of reasons. And after Prabhupada left, and in the 1980s, so many had left and hadn't been seen. And he made a very strong effort. And of course, internet was established by this time, by the mid-90s, to see that they would come back somehow or other, to try to find them, encourage them, care for them, give them some love. And somehow or other, I was one of those people. This was like 1995. So his idea was that for Prabhupada's centennial, his 100th anniversary of his appearance here, that we would all get together. And it actually influenced me. I was going to the temple occasionally. I lived almost an hour away at that time in the 90s, so I was going in frequently. But just the idea that someone cared, someone of his caliber, already in the 90s, Maharaj was very well known. Just that he cared made a difference for me. And it was the following year that I came to Vrindavan. It was the first time I had come here in over 10 years. So he had a strong influence on me just in that way. I mentioned just last year for Janmashtami and Panihati festival, we were together. We were speaking together. I would give class, he would give class. And we worked very nicely together. He would just talk about Srila Prabhupada, and I would do the same. And he was so encouraging and very sweet. Every time he would come to the classes I would give, and after the class, 2 years apart, both Panihati festivals, after the class, he came up to me each time and gave me a big embrace and said, that class, he said, was brilliant. He said, was wonderful. He just loved Prabhupada so much. I've seen as these days have gone on, now it's almost 1 week since he left, the impact it's had on our society. And I am, of course, very happy for Maharaj. He's back with Prabhupada, wherever Prabhupada is taking him to do his service. But for our ISKCON society in this present day, it's a great loss for us, because he's, as they say, in every way, he was just wonderful. He had imbibed so many of Prabhupada's qualities. I was saying here the other morning at class, I was listening to the devotees speak about him, his different qualities. And one devotee said something, he was saying how when you go to see Maharaj, how he has so much time. He seems like you're the only person in the world he's talking to. He doesn't stop to look at his watch. He gives you all the time. He makes you feel important. And when I heard him say that this is what I always say about Srila Prabhupada. This is what it was like when people say, what was it like to be with Prabhupada? And these are the things that I would say. These things they're saying about Maharaj now were so much reflective of just how Prabhupada was. He made you feel special. Once in those years in the 90s, someone asked me, did Prabhupada treat any of his disciples special? And it was what we say in English, a loaded question, because they have one of my godbrother, Guru, Sannyasi godbrothers as their spiritual master. So they were very sure Prabhupada treated them special, treated this person special. So they asked me in that way. But when I thought about it, and not very long, just a minute or so, I thought about it and I thought, yes, everyone, Prabhupada treated everyone special. This is how Prabhupada made the society what it was, by genuinely caring. And you could see that, you could feel that, you could see it, you could hear it, you could see it in Prabhupada's eyes, you could hear it in the way he spoke and the time he would give to us. So when I hear people speak about Bhakti Charu Maharaj, I hear many of these qualities that made being with Prabhupada so special. And I saw how Maharaj, Bhakti Charu Maharaj, he imbibed these qualities from Srila Prabhupada. When I was with him over these last few years in Atlanta, I felt that way myself, being around him, understanding how valuable he was in the society, how in demand he was all over the world. But when I was with him, it was just being with an old friend. He made you feel very comfortable. He would call me into his room. I never realized it was going to be the last time that I was seeing him. In the last visit, it meant so much to me being with him. We were there were some other godbrothers that had come also. We would have lunch, sometimes lunch together. Maharaj would have all of us come, so there would be a half a dozen or so. Panchagoda was there, temple president of Vrindavan here, another godbrother, Teja Prakash. And we would sit and take prasadam together. And the one day Maharaj, he looked at us and he said, here's what I want to do. He said, maybe for next year. Now he's talking to myself, he's talking to a few temple presidents of different temples. And he said, I would like us to get started and do a program. This was just last year. He said, where we try to find all the devotees in the US, all the Prabhupada disciples, our God brothers and God sisters in the US that don't come to the temples for some reason or another. He said, I want to rent a facility somewhere, nice place, somewhere in the country, in the US, that's somewhere in the middle, so we can bring people from all around the US to come for a week. He said, and just take care of them. He said, just get together, give them nice prasadam, have some kirtans, and just show them, just show that we care. He said, this will be expensive. He says it might cost a few $100,000. He said, those that don't have funds, we have to pay for their tickets. He said, we have to pay for the facilities for everyone to stay. We have to have nice prasadam. He says, and maybe there'll be 100 or so. He said, I can start it out. He said, maybe $100,000. He said, to get things started. So this was literally 25 years later, after he had done the same thing back in the 90s, wanting to see that his God brothers, his God sisters, Prabhupada's sons and daughters, that they were taken care of. This was the way Prabhupada did things. Once someone was there, once someone was serving Srila Prabhupada, he took care of us. As was announced, I've been traveling, even my recent traveling. So anyway, he put this plan together. He said, every month, let's have a meeting on the phone. And he said, we can start to get this together. So this was in addition to everything else he's doing, which was, of course, developing the farm project now outside of Orlando. And these were some of the things he was eager. He was eager to get back in the States. He wanted to see that everybody in ISKCON society felt cared for as Prabhupada gave us. You know, this was those of us who were around, so many of us, just like him, just like myself, being with Prabhupada, you see how much he cares. And this is what I see Bhakti Charu Maharaj. He just cared. He didn't want to see anyone go away. Just like Prabhupada never wanted to see anyone leave once they came to ISKCON. Everyone in the society was happily serving Srila Prabhupada. ISKCON, Bhakti Charu Maharaj is not just, sometimes we say people are a Prabhupada man. We can say person's ISKCON fanatic. Maharaj, I loved him so much because very much like me, he was those things. He was Prabhupada man and he was an ISKCON man. We know that when he would give initiation, he would make them vow. He had the fifth vow. Bhakti Chaitanya Swami does the same, that they never leave ISKCON. Bhakti Charu Maharaj, he's known for even telling his disciples sometimes, even if I leave ISKCON, you can never leave ISKCON. So aside from everything else, all his wonderful qualities, that of very sweet devotee, everything he did, I can assure you, just watching his last classes, being with him over the last few years, seeing him every year for a week or so, that he was on a very wonderful level. Is all he wanted to do was serve Srila Prabhupada, carry out his orders for the rest of his life. And all I can think of is that Prabhupada needed him. He has certainly achieved greatness, Maharaj, by his service to Srila Prabhupada, his loyalty, his dedication, everything he was doing. And somehow or other, Prabhupada has taken him. So I wanted to tell one thing as well. I had about a year ago, almost 2 years ago now, I have a god brother. Svatantra was his name. He was, the last 2 years I've been in Hawaii, he was the head pujari there. As he was serving the Panchatattva one morning, he had a brain aneurysm. Anyway, he collapsed serving the deity. They took him to a hospital. He had a blood clot in his brain. They drilled in. Over the course of the next few days, they put him in a induced coma. We hear about these induced comas, like when they did the intubation on Maharaj, they put you in the induced coma. So this Svatantra was in an induced coma for 3-4 days until he finally left his body. And I was going to visit him every day. Of course, you couldn't speak with him, apparently unconscious. You don't see physical consciousness there. But they told me he would be leaving within 12 to 24 hours, so I went to him. His son, adult son, was living in the temple as well. And I knew Svatantra was concerned about him. So I was sitting by his bed, and I was talking to him. Again, he was in an induced coma. But everything was hooked up. His blood pressure, his brain activity, IV was there, heart monitor was there. Everything was going on, being monitored. And as I talked to him, I could see all the indicators. They all moved upward. The blood pressure went up, brain activity went up, everything went up. And I was telling him that it was okay for him to leave. His son would be taken care of at the temple. And I could see the more I was talking with him, that he was very much conscious. It may not be that we could see his being conscious, but he was hearing everything I was saying. And I could see it by the way these indicators were moving. So I'm just know for certain, under all conditions, Maharaj was always conscious. He was listening to Prabhupada chanting, listening to Prabhupada's lectures. As Prabhupada would say, never alone. Prabhupada, so many times I was before Prabhupada when he would speak about his spiritual master. And he would say, because I'm doing his service, following his instructions, he's always with me. So we're all in the situation now. I know each day that goes by, I actually realize so much more how I miss Maharaj already. What a big loss it is for me. What a loss it is for all of us. But in another way, just like Srila Prabhupada is with us, I feel Prabhupada's presence as long as I'm doing his service. I'm speaking about him, I can feel him very closely, following his instructions, trying to do Prabhupada's business. So we're in that situation now with Bhakti Charu Maharaj as well. So many projects he has going on, so many ways. I spoke to many of his disciples here in Vrindavan, and I said, I've learned myself over many, many years. Prabhupada left 44 years ago. 44 years ago, Prabhupada left. We learn after the spiritual master goes, our association becomes very much by our service to him, following his instructions, carrying out their orders. So Maharaj also, he has so many projects that were important to him. So for all of us that miss him and will continue to miss him as days, weeks, months, years go by, that's always there, that feeling. With Prabhupada, that feeling is there. But the way to satiate, the way to feel some satisfaction is by meditating on them. Of course, I'm meditating on our service to them. So this will be the same thing. I said, now Bhakti Charu Maharaj will be there for his disciples even more in so many ways. It's just by our service. This is how we keep that connection. It's by our service. So that doesn't change. In the disciplic succession, it goes on in the same way. Prabhupada's disciples always grieve for his leaving. Me, I'll always feel I should never have left his personal service. Regret's always going to be there. But the only balm, the thing that gives us any relief is by serving them. So this is, we're going to see more and more with Maharaj, with his followers, his disciples. If they want to feel some satisfaction, they want to lessen that feeling of separation, it's going to be through service. We would have lunch with Maharaj each day. Of course, he himself, again, wonderful cook. And he enjoyed cooking. He enjoyed cooking for others. He enjoyed serving them. These are things you could say just as Prabhupada did. He understood. Maharaj understood very much what Krishna consciousness was, what it meant to be devotee. He was a devotee through and through. When we were in Atlanta, a few of his disciples, his female disciples, of course, they were cooking for him. And we were sitting at the table. So there were about 8 of us. It was him and his godbrothers all at the table. And they were bringing Maharaj one preparation, another preparation, another preparation, in the course of a few minutes. But the rest of us, we were just sitting at empty plates. And they're bringing something else. And Maharaj just looked at them and said, I can't eat. He said, how can I eat? He said, oh my godbrothers are sitting here waiting for prasadam. He said, bring everyone prasadam. So again, this was Maharaj. He was thoughtful. He would see things. He was observant. That's what I always say about Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada, he always knew what was going on around him. Even you would think he was just sitting in the chair comfortably having a conversation. He knew what each and every person was doing. He knew what each person needed, if they needed something. He was observant. So in that way, Maharaj was also just a gentleman. Once when Prabhupada was asked what it means to be devotee, what he say of devotee, he said is a perfect gentleman. I saw one question come up. Could I speak about my time with Srila Prabhupada? I could certainly speak a little bit about that. Of course, and that's what I see, and again, it's what I admire so much about Bhakti Charu Maharaj, is how in so many ways he reminded me of Srila Prabhupada. Perfect gentleman, just like Prabhupada. As I said, I was his servant for 2.5 years, which was a long time. It was actually was the longest anyone had been his servant. Continued last days on the planet. So Prabhupada was the perfect gentleman. Even I was his servant. He was my spiritual master. I was his disciple, and I was his personal servant. Sometimes he would ring his bell. That was the servant's job. Prabhupada rang the bell. Servant went into the room, offered obeisances to see what Prabhupada wanted. And imagine, Prabhupada's got a bell. It's not an electric bell. It's not texting on a phone. It's just ringing a little brass bell. So the servant was always within earshot of that bell, which means basically you were right outside Prabhupada's door. So this is what we did 24 hours a day. You would be right outside that door waiting for Prabhupada to ring his bell. But even when he did that, he could still surprise you. I would go in his room, offer obeisances. He would look at me, say, "Can you give me massage now?" And I would become overwhelmed. I'd say, "Prabhupada, I'm traveling around the world to do nothing but to serve you." But he would ask it, didn't demand. He always, everything he did just made you become more attached to him. He was very cultured in the sweetest way. There was another question came up there. What was that? Mataji, do you know?
Yes, Prabhuji. The next question says, the question is continued. They want to know your experience with His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj in his last days on this planet, and what is your instructions to disciples of His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj?
Hmm. Um, well, of course, like I said, last time I saw him, I watched his class when he got to the States. Hmm. Um, the instructions we get, basically, pure devotee always wants us to follow in the footsteps. So Maharaj, like most of us back from those days, I always say, I sometimes hear in Vrindavan, Prabhupada's appearance day, disappearance day, for the memories day. For Maharaj the other day, I was the MC, and I always find it very difficult to be MC means master of ceremony. So you organize the people that are going to speak. So we had 30 devotees that wanted to speak about Bhakti True Maharaj the other day in the temple. And what we see with devotees, you give them the microphone, they're preachers, especially Prabhupada's disciples. You give them a microphone and they'll speak and speak and speak and speak. So it becomes very difficult to get many people to speak in 1 hour or 2 hours. This is what Maharaj was doing. Maharaj said he was sitting very comfortably there in Ujjain, but he really wanted to fulfill Prabhupada's mission. And it very much seemed just like before Prabhupada left. What did he tell Abhiram? What did Maharaj say? Bhakti True Maharaj said. He told him, specifically, he told him that only 50% of his work was finished, and he wanted to do Varnashram, of course, and set up farms very nicely. He wanted to encourage the farms. And this, of course, was one of the big projects Maharaj in the last few years in Florida began. He wanted to show that same ideal society, the Daivi Varnashram system that Prabhupada wanted. We can see today the importance of this all over the world. Everybody's vision in this last few months has changed drastically. And now, of course, in so many ways, devotees are lamenting that we didn't take seriously Prabhupada's instruction of setting up nice varnashrams, setting up nice farm communities. Prabhupada said millions of people would come to the farms just for work. And Prabhupada's idea was just let them work, you give them prasadam, and gradually they'll make more and more advancement in Krishna consciousness. Not even that they would be devotees when they would come, but Prabhupada could understand 50 years ago that things would be in such a way that people would come to the farms just to be able to work, and they'll do whatever you want them to do. Prabhupada saw this. Prabhupada wanted this established. So I see Maharaj's last wishes were very much like that. He wanted to establish this very nice community there in Florida, outside Orlando. And he wanted it so much that even against the judgment of others and many, he wanted to go to the US to do that. The other thing I see was very, very important for Maharaj, and every time I was with him, my last 3 visits with him over the last year and a half, he always spoke about Srila Prabhupada, his service to Prabhupada, his personal service, how wonderful it was. But he spoke about Prabhupada's leaving and how Prabhupada's leaving was timely. In that very last lecture, I saw him say to the people that were in front of him, the devotees in front of him, he said, you may have heard some things already. He said, or you might hear in the future some things about how Prabhupada left. And of course, this poison theory, conspiracy. And I saw personally, because he asked me to do videos, he called me up on the phone, we discussed it, we figured different angles about it to show that everything Prabhupada did was as Krishna desired, as Prabhupada desired, and that he certainly wasn't poisoned. This was a point Maharaj kept making to me. And it was something that I saw that he was very serious about, and he wanted to establish it without a doubt before he left. And so both those things were very important to Maharaj. This ISKCON society went on, its greatness. He saw it as a wonderful society, just as Prabhupada did. Prabhupada said it was his body. Prabhupada said the BBT was his heart. So just like myself, Maharaj was raised in the same way. ISKCON was everything to him. So just like for Srila Prabhupada, for Bhakti True Maharaj, if we want to serve him very nicely, then we serve his mission, this ISKCON society. It's not a difficult thing to do. There's so many opportunities all over the world. As Maharaj has given us opportunities, so many of my godbrothers, opportunities are there. Here in Vrindavan, there's so much services there. Everywhere we go, by Srila Prabhupada's mercy. So you can easily please both Srila Prabhupada and Bhakti True Maharaj just by being engaged in service in this ISKCON society. And if we do that, they'll be pleased. We serve Prabhupada's mission, he'll be pleased. Sometimes I say when I speak, I say when I was with Prabhupada, so many times I would see people go into his room, Prabhupada's conversations with them. I say, Prabhupada never asks someone, are you chanting?
Yes, Prabhuji. There's a question that says, I am amazed how you all Prabhupada disciples are so much attached and sincere to Srila Prabhupada even after more than 40 years. Can you please guide what keeps you all going?
Well, Prabhupada keeps us going because he's still here after all these years. And is what you find out in Krishna consciousness, at least my experience, is that actually we can see Prabhupada doing things. You can see Krishna doing things in Krishna consciousness as we go through the years, making arrangements. It's always personal, but it becomes more and more personal as you can actually see the Lord and you can see your spiritual master making arrangements for us, even taking things away to keep us close, whatever it takes. I've seen myself over the years that when I'm engaged in service, when I do what I understand is some meaningful service, Krishna makes all arrangements for me. But if I sit back and try to relax a little bit, then I have to make my own arrangements. But if as soon as you surrender to Krishna, put all your faith in Krishna and engage in service, actually everything works out very nicely. So that's what I've seen over many years of trial and error and being engaged in service and maybe not being engaged in service so well. As I said, Maharaj himself, the last time I was with Maharaj was September last year, almost about 10 months ago. And it was Maharaj who arranged my trip to South Africa. In December, January, and February, my wife and I traveled for 2.5 months to Mauritius, half a dozen temples and preaching centers in Mauritius, and then through South Africa, 6 different temples, and then Nairobi, Kenya, Mombasa, Kenya. And he was instrumental in making the first arrangement for me to take this trip to Africa after I've been wanting to go there ever since Prabhupada went there in 1975, months after I left his personal service. So I've always had that desire. I mentioned it when I was with Bhakti Charu Maharaj, who of course had been everywhere. Has so many followers, disciples in South Africa. So he made some contacts, and now I can only lament. It was a wonderful, wonderful trip, 10 weeks. Every place Prabhupada had been, we went there. There were temples in all these places. This is the potency of pure devotee. Wherever they go, temples spring up. Unfortunately, I was never even was able to thank Maharaj for giving me such an opportunity. So now, like many of you, I can only speak to him. He's able to hear. I've seen with other God brothers that have left. He's there. You can speak to him. This is the transcendental position. So I have him much to thank for, and I'm just like everyone else. I'm very sorry that Prabhupada's Krishna have taken him so swiftly from our view.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji.